So there's a long time tradition of a Simcha Beit HaShoeva during Chol HaMoed, in the middle days of Sukkot, to have a big party. And it recalls for us the joy of the water drawing that the Talmud says anybody who didn't see the joy of the water drawing in the temple on Simchat Torah on the days of Sukkot had never seen joy in their days. And so it's a big party. So, but on Chol HaMoed Sukkot, the Vilna Gaon dies in 1797. So, of course, that puts an enormous damper on things. Rak Chasidei Vilna hamshichu b'chagigas simchas beis HaShoeva k'ragel. But the Chasidim keep partying. Now, in Vilna. So, you have to ask yourself, what's going on here, right? So on the one hand, the halacha is that you don't start mourning. I mean, you bury the person, but you actually don't. It's a very strange halacha. If somebody dies in the middle days of Sukkot or Pesach, you don't mourn. You don't start Shiva. You bury the person, and then Shiva begins after the entire holiday. You could wait a whole week and then start Shiva. It's very strange for mourners. But the halachically, you're not supposed to mourn during the holiday. So on the one hand, are the Chasidim right? They're sort of right. On the other hand, I'm sure that for the people of Vilna, it was like a loved one. I'm sure, it like the whole world probably fell apart. I mean, he was the greatest rabbi of the generation. And people speak about the Vilna Gaon as if he was not even just the greatest rabbi of the generation, but the greatest rabbi, ever. In terms of his erudition and his mind and his ability, both, of course, in revealed Torah and Kabbalah. And there's no argument about that. So what should have happened? Part of this really speaks to culture, right? In other words, the Chasidim are 25 years before this. What are they accusing the Chasidim of? They're too happy. They dance too much, and it doesn't make them sad when they sin. Right? Remember, those are like some of the original criticisms, and doing crazy things. So, like that sense of the Chasidim that we still have today, that they're. I think we see it as praiseworthy today. That it's something. The thing they stress most is serve God with joy, right? I mean, that's what Rabbi Nachman always said, and that's like I think it's partly why the combination of Chassidut and outreach that you find in Chabad has been so incredibly successful, because that appeals to us. In the yeshiva world, yes, there are those who are still opposed to Chassidim and see themselves very much as non-Hasidim because they don't think that's the right path. They think a path that's much more serious and much more, it's not that Hasidim are not punctilious, they are about many things. It's a cultural difference. Should your Judaism be, feel like a yoke upon your neck? Maybe it should. We talk about receiving the yoke of heaven. Should it be a serious thing? Maybe it should. On the other hand, it does say serve God with joy, right? So that's the thing in Jewish history. Everything is about what you stress. Christianity at the beginning was not such a break-off from Judaism. It's just that they stressed one thing, which is it's the laws between human beings that are important, not the ritual laws. You don't need to do the ritual laws. That's been taken care of for you. So, of course, that goes astray. And the truth is the Reform movement did the same thing. Maybe not at the very beginning. The very beginning, it was about, being a mensch. But after a while, it becomes the prophetic Judaism, they called it, because it was about the mitzvahs between people. And that got stressed kind of, and it obfuscates the mitzvahs between us and God. So whenever you boil Judaism, whenever you stress one thing in Judaism over everything else, you're going astray. Something's going to go wrong. Now the Chasidim, aren't only stressing joy, but you could see why this happened. First of all, it doesn't help that the Vilna Gaon was in a war against the Chasidim. It probably didn't make them too sad. that he passed away. On the other hand, Rabbi Yishner Zalman V'Yadi has a lot of respect for the Vilna Gaon. But in a certain sense, the halacha is that I'm not sure they should have stopped the parties. On the other hand, I'm sure that the non-Chasidim, their world was torn apart. So Makorot Misnagdim Misaprim, the sources that we have of Mitnagdim, they tell the story. Shachaside Vilna Odo Sifa Lechug B'Simchatam B'Yom Mot Yeravam Hagadol. That the story that the Chasidim tell in their sources that we have from that period that the Misnagdim tell, those who were against the Chasidim tell, is that the Chasidim kept going with their parties, even though the Vilna Gaon died. And Harag Bakar V'Shachat Tzon, they were slaughtering animals and roasting them. And not only did they continue with the party, but it was very party. And so this angered the community of Vilna that was not Hasidim. And during the burial, on the next day, on the 20th of Tishrei, Nishba'u Hakitzonim, the extremists swore, the extremists among the Misnagdim swore, Lehinakam, to take vengeance against the Hasidim because they had disregarded the honor of the Vilna Gaon. Now remember, even before this, a few years before, right, the criticism, what we saw, the broadside that was announced in Minsk, I think it was, the main criticism of the Chasidim was that they're not respecting the Vilna Gaon. So this is just, I'm sure this adds fuel to the fire. And you could imagine, like he's the leader of the Jewish people, and he dies, and they probably feel, lost. And so this reinvigorates the war. And you could imagine it's probably even more so, right? Now people are going to feel like they're carrying his banner. We know how this stuff goes. 10 men get together that day. And they present essentially before the community that they should restart the war against the Chasidim, the one that we had started 25 years before in 1772. But it should be done now with even more vengeance, with even more passion. And this group chose a leadership cadre of 5 people, called the Group of 5. It's already sounding bad. Sheyitnan lo yofi koach chaz chaf zayin tuve'ir. That they would give them the power to, wage this war, and that they would manage this. Lirdov kol mashtayach lekat, leket u'machuyav kol chaver b'kila. They would obligate everybody in the community that if they know a chassid, they have to hand them over to the Group of 5. This is sounding very bad. Wow. And all of this was fueled by a certain person, a certain rodef. Rodef means somebody who's chasing after somebody to kill them. So I don't know who that if it's referring to an individual. It sounds like a quote. Rodef. Oh, and everybody in our community should run after the Chasidim. Now, the word rodef means when you run after somebody to kill them. So it's not looking good. And the Group of 5 was chosen, and they snapped into action. Lurabot kilkaliot al kol mishnechshed b'shteichos lakat. It sounds like it's an inquisition, that they're going to investigate everybody who is suspected of being a chassid. We can explain that the resurgence or the renewal of the excommunication against the Chasidim, it wasn't really just because they disregarded the honor of the Vilna Gaon. But it's also because of the interesting. He's arguing here that it's also because of the Chasidim of Vilna, their power. Let's see, that even on the second day of Sukkot, the day before the Vilna Gaon died, that they already had started this against the Chasidim. For the old reasons, which was that they yell out loud during davening and they've changed the language of davening. Pinkas hayashan shal kloiz hayashan. In the Pinkas, the diary volume. A lot of communities had a Pinkas, a diary volume. Even groups had this. Actually, in the archives of Kesher Israel, I found a 100-year-old book that was a Pinkas of the Chevra Kadisha, a volume. It was basically a diary that they kept. And this is of the old community in Vilna. And he's going to quote it. He'll copy it. He'll show a facsimile of it later here. So it sounds like that it didn't come out of nowhere, that even before this, there was a desire to reinvigorate the war against the Chasidim. And so, but then the next day, and it was already happening, I guess, during Chol HaMoed, it seems kind of crazy, but the next day when the Vilna Gaon dies, it becomes obviously just even more. Now the Chasidim, how did they respond? They did not sit quietly. In Panel Shiltonot, Vaichala Parshat Halishnot Mishneit Stadim. Parshat Aguma Zu Nidon Mahalan Perak Alariv Bena Chasidim Vilna. We're going to have some letters about the response of the Chasidim. And Rishner Zalman gets involved. And it is Duvnov, the author who had put together some of these things we were reading before this. We wrote a book called Toldos Chasidim. Bring some of this. Okay. So this is now we're up to the Cherem itself. This is the letter of excommunication that's written, I guess, right after the Vilna Gaon dies. Let's see if we have a date on it. I assume it was from, yeah. It's dated at the end. Sure does, because it's signed by a lot of people. Yom Chaf Tishrei, 1797. So Chaf Tishrei is the 5th day of Sukkot. Right, Sukkot begins on the 15th. So that's going to be day 3 of Chol HaMoed. So it's really the day after they sit down and write this. I mean, right after the funeral, they sit down and write this excommunication. Okay. So, we'll do this one. It's interesting. You really, you get a sense that it's not that, obviously when you talk about history, you're talking about something that's moving, changing, developing. It's not one day. It doesn't happen overnight. Obviously, we're talking about a span of 100 years, and how these things the machinations within communities. And we could imagine this. I mean, this stuff makes sense. It's partly theology and it's partly fear and it's partly cultural clash, culture clash. That's
So if someone dies during Chol Hamoed, you don't start Shiva till after, but during the balance of the holiday, you just, how do
in
you
theory,
comport?
everything's
Observe the holiday.
in theory, everything's normal. Now, for the mourner themselves, they would not show signs of mourning on the outside, but they would have certain signs of mourning privately. Um, but
But
generally,
you would do Hoshanas and say Hallel
yeah,
and the whole.
yeah. I mean, community. Now, there is an argument that when a rabbi of a community dies, that in a sense everybody's a mourner. There is an idea like that. Everybody might tear their clothes. But yeah, in theory, everything should go on. You shouldn't change, or else it's a disregard to the holiday. Yeah. So yeah, it's a hard thing for mourners, I think. But yeah, I mean, it seems like here the halacha. That's a good question. I mean, sometimes the halacha sees the death of a great tzaddik, the death of a great righteous person, as different. So that's a good question. Whose side is the halacha on here? Should we? I'll in fact, I'll look it up in the Shulchan Aruch and I'll show you the source for it, for this case, because obviously it happens.
But the party that you're describing on the water drawing, that was a custom, or they viewed that as?
No, it was a custom. It was a custom. The place it really happened was in the temple in Jerusalem. And this is in memory of that. This is just to celebrate the holiday. You don't have to do a party on Chol Hamoed. You can understand what the non-Chasidim are saying. Like, why you don't have to have, like, it makes so much sense. It's just sort of borderline, it's not crazy that the non-Hasidim are saying, like, why are you having a party? Like, you don't have to have a party on Chol Hamoed. Stay in your houses, and I'm not saying you should violate, the holiday or the Chol Hamoed, but you don't have to have a party. And that makes a lot of sense. So are the Hasidim continuing to dance because that's their culture? That's their view of Judaism? Or is it because their enemy just died? I don't know.
Well, it does seem to suggest what you said the other day, which is sometimes a war starts and it's one way at the top, and then between the supporters and the supporters, it's
sure, right, and that's right. I mean, we're not talking about groups of rabbis. We're talking about the people. Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi doesn't live in Vilna. There's a little minyan in Vilna, at least 25 years before. Maybe it's grown a little, but it's and is it the mainstream people? You could imagine that what the people that are being galvanized toward the Hasidim are not necessarily, it could be the people that didn't fit in. It could be it's the people that are doing handstands in the marketplace. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I don't think there's no great Hasidic rabbi that we associate with Vilna. It's not like Rabbi Shneur Zalman is there. He's not. He's in Liadi, and others have gone to Israel, and others are in other places. So yeah, it's hard to know, what are we really talking about? How many people? Who are they? What's their mental state? So yeah. All right. Have a good Shabbat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
too.